The Tolkien Road, Episode 187, Second Age Deep Dive, The Mariner's Wife, Part 4. Hello everyone, welcome to The Tolkien Road, Episode 187, Second Age Deep Dive, The Mariner's Wife, Part 4. Our journey through The Mariner's Wife is coming to an end on this episode. So,
yes, it is.
It's been pretty epic.
It's been more epic than I expected it to be.
Yeah, and we've learned a lot about Númenor in the process.
We have.
Yeah.
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
So,
I hope you guys have too.
If you've been listening, then
you
probably have.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Glad we did this, and looking forward to talking about this last part here.
Word.
Want to give a shout out to our newest Patreon patron, Magnus V. Thanks, Magnus. Thanks for your pledge.
Thank you.
And for those who are not currently patrons, if you would like to become a patron, you can head on over to patreon.com/TolkienRoad, pledge $1 or more per episode, and you can set a monthly limit when you do it. So we'd really appreciate your patronage. Please patronize us. And when you do so, you get lots of cool free stuff. And hopefully, I need to get something else free for our patrons going here soon. So,
yeah.
And then rate us on iTunes. Leave us a 5-star rating and say some nice things about us. So if you got something nice to say about us, now's the time to do it. So I keep on seeing the latest comment up there, and because I get this like digest from some service every week, and then it gives all the comments. And I think lots of people leave ratings because the rating is super easy, but it takes a little longer to leave a comment. And like the last rating is not a very nice one, so I keep on seeing that one up there. So if you want to put a little sunshine in my day, go over there and say some nice things about us if you got nice things to say. So, which I assume you do if you're listening to us through on episode 187 about part 4 of The Mariner's Wife.
Right.
I assume you enjoy our show. So
sure, yeah.
But yeah, head on over to iTunes or your podcast app of choice and leave us a 5-star rating. And then we'd love to hear from you at tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. By the way, our next episode in 2 weeks will be a mailbag episode on Aldarion and Erendis, and whatever else you'd like to talk about, you email us about. So if you got something to say, if you'd like to be heard on the next mailbag episode, send us an email at tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com, or you can go through tolkienroad.com and use the contact form over there. Those are the 2 ways we accept mail submissions. Or, as always, you can send us a voicemail and you'll get to the front of the line with SpeakPipe. So just head on over to tolkienroad.com and drop us a SpeakPipe.
Please.
Yes, sound good?
Yeah.
I was just making sure that Greta hadn't completely drifted off there. So...
Phew.
So yeah, 2 weeks. We'll be recording that mailbag episode here in about 2 weeks. So that's the plan for the next episode.
Sounds awesome.
If you need something to do in the meantime, you can listen to our interview on Card Talk. I actually put that up as an episode here this past week on our own podcast feed. And then there's my 2-part interview on Leaf by Niggle with Bellator Colloquium podcast. And then as always, you can re-listen to old episodes.
There's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
So.
Sounds like a plan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish this up.
Let's roll.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So, last part of Aldarion and Erendis, The Mariner's Wife. Again, just like to reiterate that the 3 key themes of the Second Age are the delaying elves, Sauron's growth to a new Dark Lord, and Númenor / in parentheses Atlantis, which is... This is kind of Tolkien's Atlantis story, if you will. So those are the 3 things that we're concerned with, and Númenor has been in focus in this. The third theme, Númenor, has been in focus in this particular story, but Sauron and the Delaying Elves are both kind of becoming more and more important as the story goes on. So Aldarion is the 8th king of Númenor, and then Erendis is his wife, and they have a very contentious relationship.
I was going to say tumultuous.
Tumultuous, maybe
too.
tumultuous, maybe even a better word.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, and just as a refresher, this is like the best full story that we have that gives us like the flavor of Númenor, right? Like what Númenor was like on an everyday basis, maybe, right? It is early in the history of Númenor, so it's probably a couple of thousand years before really the downfall, right? The worst parts of Akalabaith, but we already can see some of the seeds of the future unrest and difficulties being and unpleasantness being sown here within this story. So, when we left off last time, Tarmin Eldor, who is Aldarion's father, the seventh king, he resigns after he reads a letter from Gil-galad. This letter was the letter that Gil-galad had sent with Aldarion to hand to Tarmin Eldor. And Tarmin Eldor basically says, well, the letter basically says, we need help, right? The shadow is rising, and we need to act now, and I'm asking for your help as the leader of Númenor. And Tarmin Eldor basically says, like, I'm too much of a man of peace to do a good job in all of this. He's basically like Hamlet, right?
Yeah.
He's a very like, damned if I do, damned if I don't kind of guy. And he basically just says, you know what? The best choice I can make here is to resign and give the kingship to my son, Aldarion. And because he seems like he's capable of handling this the right way, or in a better than I can. Because Tarmin Eldor just doesn't see any way around like acting in some form or another, but he's always been this man, this kind of king of peace of Númenor, and Aldarion is much more familiar with Middle-earth and has all the relationships with the right people in Middle-earth, and he's going to be king at some point anyway, so why not go ahead and let him do this, right?
It's a good call, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the right call. The other part of it is that Erendis refuses to return for the coronation of Aldarion as the king.
Maybe not so good a call, but a call nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so go back and listen to the previous episodes on this story. Erendis has basically grown bitter over time towards Aldarion and
all men.
And all men, but really it's the fault of Aldarion. And so that's where really things left off. So the disappointing thing here is that, like as you might surmise based on the title of this book that this is in, this is an unfinished tale. And we finished the finished portion last week.
What Tolkien had actually written.
Well,
right?
and what he had kind of, what he had actually, like, I think, written as a more or less final draft or close enough to a final draft, right? He left notes on the rest of it, and part of what Christopher always did with all of his father's works after his father passed away was he tried to piece together as much of a cohesive narrative as he could for these various stories, right?
Right.
So what we have here is the further course of the narrative, and then there's some notes at the very end. But it kind of gives a good feel for how the rest of this would go. And essentially, it starts off, and Aldarion becomes king in 883, and then he basically returns to Middle-earth immediately.
Right.
As you might suspect from a guy who really loves the sea, he becomes king, and then he's like, I'm king now, see you later, right?
Which was unprecedented.
Yeah.
I don't think that had happened before.
Well, he's the only seagoing king, really, right?
Yeah.
That they've had.
Right.
So.
No, that's true. But it's, I don't know, it's interesting to me. Like, it's not surprising, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, totally, but it's also a little like, we kind of wish that just the fact that he was king would have been enough to keep Aldarion closer. You know, that he would have felt enough responsibility to his people and to his land to not just hit the waves again, but... Well,
surf's up, dude.
Yeah, he just could not resist.
Right.
Yeah.
So, he takes off, heads back to Middle-earth, and it says, it seems that when Aldarion became king of Númenor in the year 883, he determined to revisit Middle-earth at once and departed from Mithlond either in the same year or the next. It is recorded that on the prow of Hiralande he had no bow of Oyolare, but the image of an eagle with golden beak and jeweled eyes, which was the gift of Círdan. So he heads back out there, and it says all of All of Aldarion's labors, meaning the labors in Middle-earth, were swept away. The works that he began again at Venulande were never completed, and the sea gnawed them. Nevertheless, he laid the foundation for the achievement of Tar-Minestir long years after, in the first war with Sauron, and but for his works the fleets of Númenor could not have brought their power in time to the right place, as he foresaw. Already the hostility was growing, and dark men out of the mountains were thrusting into Enedwaith. But in Aldarion's day the Númenorians did not yet desire more room, and his venturers remained a small people, admired but little emulated. So it turns out that, all this stuff that Aldarion had been doing, it's funny because I feel like early on in the story, Aldarion comes off as he comes off as like just kind of flighty, like he's just like, I just want to go to sea and just be at sea. But this is one of those stories where you find out that like what seemed to be like kind of youthful indulgence actually turns out, and maybe it was that at first, but it actually turns out that it was that it's a good thing he did that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It turns out that all of those works that he was constructing actually served a purpose, a very important purpose in later years, and that maybe he even had some foresight as to it was unrealistic for Númenor to just expect to dwell in bliss without a care in the world for the rest of it, for the rest of history, right?
Yeah.
That it was somehow, just because it had this big ocean around it, that it was somehow protected from any dangers, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't want to get into all of this, but it's interesting. Kind of like this brings up the whole question of like isolationism versus versus I don't know whatever the opposite of isolationism is, but in terms of like foreign policy, and that's something that like in the history of the U.S. has always been this back and forth sort of question. Like, do we get involved in things overseas or do we not? Right. And, especially before the last century, it was a much more, even up to World War II, it was a very big question, like whether we should get involved or not. We didn't get involved in World War II until much later into the war, and only kind of when we were attacked. But this brings up that question of like, can we just sit idly by and let the rest of the world kind of go to pot, or will it eventually come knocking on our door?
Yeah,
right?
and affect us, right?
Yeah. So, that this all raises that question here, and it really does appear that for all of his faults, Aldarion had some wisdom in all of this, and he was a king of destiny, I'd say.
Yeah.
To be this heir that was wanted. Not that he he knew all this stuff was unfolding when he was a young man, but like that he just wanted to go to sea. And so there was something about like he opened that door for Númenor,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right king at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or was he, right? Or should they never have done that? And then maybe they never would have fallen, right? Like, because Sauron would have, would he have never...
that's interesting. Yeah, because by opening the door to one thing, then you're potentially opening it to something else.
Yeah.
So
you can understand Meneldor's...
Yeah, I can understand why he punted.
Perspective as well.
For sure, yeah.
So I guess chalk it up to fate, if you will. All right, so... jumping ahead, Middle Earth is getting darker and darker, and then we hear a little bit more about Ancalame in the story. She becomes so again, Ancalame is his daughter and the daughter of Erendis. Erendis had raised her away from men, really without any knowledge of who she was for the first several years of her life. Then Aldarion comes along and she learns more about who she is, actually, let me go back to this. There's one little note I wanted to bring out here. It says, going back to the question of their policy in Middle Earth, Aldarion was too late or too early. Too late, for the power that hated Númenor had already waked. Too early, for the time was not yet ripe for Númenor to show its power or to come back into the battle for the world. So, anyway, that's just a little interesting note.
It is. It's really kind of the damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, right? Like, yeah, too early or too late. Too late for this reason, too early for this. I mean, there's just, it can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these kind of questions, it always comes down to, like, you've got to, you've got to just, at some point, it's just like you got to act, and
one way or the other. You got to choose your path.
And just see where how it all plays out. So,
yeah. And it might, you might make the wrong decision, but you made the decision that was best at that time with the information you had, right? And with the state of affairs at that point. So it's not an easy job.
Not at
to
all.
be head of state.
Definitely not an easy job.
No.
So, so on Column, she is the daughter of Aldarion and Erendis.
Mm-hmm.
And we do learn that she becomes the heir in the year 892. And but there's a really interesting passage here from Erendis' perspective that's shared with us about kind of the nature of men in Númenor.
So were these just a quick question about, so some of this, that what we're going over now are Tolkien's actual writings, right? And some of them are notes that Christopher has kind of garnered from...
My understanding is that the parts that are almost set as quotations, right? That those are actual things that Tolkien wrote.
Gotcha.
And then the rest of it is Christopher editorializing on it, right?
Yes, okay.
So, and a lot of that editorializing is just him saying, maybe compiling other notes in his own words, right?
Okay, got it.
So, but do you want to read this section here? Men in Númenor are half-elves.
Yes.
This is from Erendis' viewpoint, everything that we're about to hear.
And this is something that Tolkien wrote.
This is something that it appears Tolkien wrote out.
Okay. Men in Númenor are half-elves, said Erendis, especially the high men. They are neither the one nor the other. The long life that they were granted deceives them, and they dally in the world, children in mind, until age finds them. And then many only forsake play out of doors for play in their houses. They turn their play into great matters and great matters into play. They would be craftsmen and lore masters and heroes all at once, and women to them are but fires on the hearth, for others to tend, until they are tired of play in the evening. All things were made for their service. Hills are for quarries, rivers to furnish water or to turn wheels, trees for boards, women for their bodies' need, or a fair to adorn their table and hearth, and children to be teased when nothing else is to do. But they would as soon play with their hounds' whelps. To all they are gracious and kind, merry as larks in the morning, if the sun shines, for they are never wrathful if they can avoid it. Men should be gay, they hold, generous as the rich, giving away what they do not need. Anger they show only when they become aware, suddenly, that there are other wills in the world beside their own. Then they will be as ruthless as the sea wind, if anything dare to withstand them. Thus it is on Column, and we cannot alter it, for men fashioned Númenor. Men, those heroes of old that they sing of. Of their women we hear less, save that they wept when their men were slain. Númenor was to be a rest after war. But if they weary of rest and the plays of peace, soon they will go back to their great play, manslaying and war. Thus it is, and we are set here among them, but we need not assent. If we love Númenor also, let us enjoy it before they ruin it. We also are daughters of the great, and we have wills and courage of our own. Therefore do not bend on Column. Once bend a little, and they will bend you further until you are bowed down. Sink your roots into the rock and face the wind, though it blow away all your leaves.
Yeah, and I'll just read this last part too. Moreover and more, and this is Christopher, I think, summarizing something. Moreover and more potently, Erendis had made on Column accustomed to the society of women, the cool, quiet, gentle life of Imarié without interruptions or alarms. Boys, like Ebal, shouted. Men rode up blowing horns at strange hours and were fed with great noise. They begot children and left them in the care of women when they were troublesome. And though childbirth had less of ills and peril, Númenor was not an earthly paradise, and the weariness of labor or of all making was not taken away. So, I mean, Erendis, she's really... This is a very bitter perspective.
Mm-hmm.
but it's not untrue either, in a lot of ways. Now, I think she's probably projecting a lot of the faults of Aldarion, who, to be sure, was a prince and a king, onto the rest of all men. So that may be a little unfair, but at the same time, as the king, or as a prince and then the king, he is going to kind of, the way he lives his life will define what manhood means in that country for many, right?
Yes.
And how other men see themselves and, kind of living their lives. So I don't know. This is a really fascinating passage. And again, I think, every once in a while you hear people, you'll hear people like complain about how there aren't any strong feminine perspectives in Tolkien's work. And it, it's usually this sort of feminist criticism. And, to me, this is another thing you can throw at people and be like, have you read Erendis?
Exactly.
Her perspective?
Exactly.
So
yeah, she doesn't mince words.
Yeah, definitely not. And this is, that was all written by Tolkien, right? So,
right.
I think he, again, I'm not a woman, so I never feel like I can speak very well from a woman's perspective necessarily, but I'm like, I've read a lot and I do think a lot, and I've heard a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different people, and to me, this is a very this seems to be like something you'd hear from a feminist perspective, right? But maybe it takes place thousands of years ago in a very ancient context, but at the same time, it's like this seems pretty feminist, some form of ancient feminism, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
as a woman, I would definitely agree.
Yeah, so. Again, I'm just like, I think Tolkien understood those things maybe better than people oftentimes give him credit for.
Yes.
So
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's, it's very bitter. It's very negative against men, but it's also not completely untrue. I mean, there are plenty of men out there that completely fit this generalization. But again, that's what it is. It's a generalization, and I think Erendis did on Columay a huge disservice by making her think that all men were like this. Mm-hmm. And it goes to show, we'll get to this eventually, I know, just when we talk about, on Columay's future and how she ends up. But, to just kind of loop or kind of like group all men into one basket, I think is completely unfair and wrong.
Yeah.
Not that Erendis, didn't have reason to, because Aldarion was a pretty crappy husband, if we're being honest. Yeah. But to just take that and project it, like just generally to all men, I don't think is right. But I would agree that this is very feministic, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, who wasn't really like this is Meneldur, her father-in-law.
That's true.
That
what
is
a great transition there, Johnny.
Well, it's true.
It is true. No, it's totally true.
But the man she knew best was definitely like this. So yeah, I was thinking, I wonder. We have no reason to speculate about this, but I think it's an interesting thought. You think that how much of like Edith's own perspective do you think is in this?
Yeah, I don't feel like I know enough about Edith.
Well, I feel like she takes such a like, we don't know a lot about her,
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like that's very similar. Like, Tolkien is this guy who was like out there, well known, and so in a way, is he a little bit like Aldarion, and she's a little bit like Erendis, right? Where she's just like, they seem to have a happier marriage than these two do, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
But at the same time, even in happy marriages, there's tension, and there's times of unhappiness, or just things like questions that keep on popping up. So anyway, there has to be something of her. I'm not saying she wrote it or even had any input into it. I'm just saying, like, don't you think that there's probably something of like conversations he'd had with Edith?
Probably.
In this, arguments, maybe even.
Probably.
I don't know.
Because she would have been the most vocal female voice in his life, right? I mean, his mom died when he was young, and he had one daughter, But as far as an adult female voice, yeah, I can imagine that she's probably the main one.
Right.
So, and the little bit that I feel like do know about Edith, I think she was a very strong woman, especially for her time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women were, it was looked down upon to be independent and to be a more strong personality back then. But I feel like she had to be at least a little bit of that to put up with Tolkien.
Yeah.
and just the life that, not that he was a bad person, but just the life that they had to live because of who he was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a parallel here, right? Because he wasn't going off on, sea voyages, but I mean, he was going up into his study and spending all of this time in his own little world that was not her world.
Right. Right. And she was left behind with the kids and the housework and all the menial tasks that had to be completed while he was off, writing fantasy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be, we do want to eventually get to the, read a biography of Tolkien, and it'll be interesting to recount this story when we get, into a good biography that probably in part examines their relationship over time.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, that would be really good.
All right, so on Calame's story. So, like I said, she became the heir in 892, and so Aldarion even still is gone a lot, and so Erendis continues to raise Ancalame in Imarié, but Ancalame is also spending some more time in Armanelos and be with Queen Almarion, who of course we haven't heard from in a while, but she's the mother of Aldarion, so the wife of Tarman Eldor, so her grandmother, in other words. So she's getting a little bit more of this other perspective, and that has an effect on her. It says she was clever and malicious and saw promise of sport as the prize for which her mother and her father did battle. What does that mean? Did you understand that part?
Where are you?
At the paragraph right before it says, now in the year 892.
Oh, I need to turn my page. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So
she was clever and malicious and saw promise of sport as the prize for which her mother and her father did battle. I guess I kind of read it as that she realized that she was, that she was kind of wanted by both of her parents. And
I see. Is she being the prize for which her mother and her father did battle? Right, she being the
prize, and she kind of used that to her advantage.
Yeah.
Like she was kind of able to leverage kind of her position as, mom really wants me, but dad wants me too, so maybe I can get this from mom and this from dad. And, that she was just kind of a little bit, not manipulative, but clever.
Right.
In how she kind of utilized that to her advantage.
Yeah, and it says as she grew older, she became ever more willful, and she found irksome the company of Erendis, who behaved like a widow and would not be queen. But she continued to return to Imarié, both as a retreat from Armanelos, because she desired thus to vex Aldarion.
And I get that totally. Like, if my mom could be queen and was refusing to be queen, I'd be like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
What? Come on.
Yeah.
You want to be... That's like every little girl's dream, right?
Right.
To be a princess and a queen. Like... So I'm glad that Erendis hasn't completely succeeded in her brainwashing of Ancalame. That Ancalame is still able to see her mother for who she is, and maybe take issue with some of the decisions she's made and the way that she's been raised. Yeah,
and this description we get of Ancalame here is I feel like this is the first glimpse of a Númenorian monarch, in character, who seems like the later kings, right? The bad kings,
the bad
kings. The bad monarchs, right?
A little glimpse,
because it says she was clever and malicious and saw promise of sport as the prize for which her mother and her father. She's manipulative, right? She's learning to be manipulative.
I just said I didn't want to use that word.
Well, but I'm sorry.
I think it's too strong.
I guess I was lost in my own head when you said that. Just thinking about this, but But
maybe she is a little bit.
Well, she's learning to be
she's learning to be.
The word malicious is there, right?
Yes,
malicious
that's
means
true.
bad intent.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. I mean, she's learning to use her position for her own advantage.
Yeah.
That's what she's doing. And I don't think that's completely wrong.
Well, and part of it is her, her parents not being able to get their act together and reconcile even for the good of their child. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when all of that happens, like, I don't know, I don't want to get into this whole thing about that, but, they got this tug of war with her, and what's a little girl to do? They're more concerned about fighting each other than they are about like maybe suppressing, like molding her to have good, to have good intentions and to be. I can't think of like good words to you. I'm trying to. I keep on just like not being able to find the word I really want to find today on this episode
to describe her.
No, just like find words for various things, like the fitting word, like when you want to find the fitting word. I can't do that. I'm sorry, I'm not on my game today or something like that. Anyway, just to have like, kids will have bad intentions in various ways if you don't teach them to have good intentions, right? If you don't mold them to have good intentions.
True.
Right? And so it's like her parents' inability to reconcile and to just keep this like stupid competition, weird, like, just not being there for each other. Like that they're so busy fighting each other that
and playing tug of war with their daughter.
And playing tug of war with her that they're not able to focus any of the energy on like, oh, wait a minute, we have a daughter to raise to be like, not just to be a queen, but like to be a good queen.
A good queen. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They failed her for sure.
Yeah. So, so we get into this bit about the new law regarding female monarchs. And I got to be honest, like this was a lot of like, there was a lot in here, and I didn't find a lot of it very interesting. I was just like,
wasn't. I kind of skimmed it.
I started reading it, and I was like, okay, this is all very complicated. And basically, it's just like now, I know there's some details here, but like now, Aldarion changes the law to ensure that his daughter can be queen, basically.
Otherwise, it would have gone to his nephew.
Right. And Ankalame, like even in this, like she's messing with her cousin. Right. What is his name? Soranto. Right.
Yeah.
There's parts about that, but eventually, it also talks about how she, let's see. Yes. So she goes away to the sheep region, and
because she's being bombarded with suitors.
Right.
And her mom has made her basically have a terrible view of all men. And so she doesn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And the only way she can get away is to go hide in the sheep country and live under guise of a shepherdess. So I think what we have here is the very first mention of what would become the witness protection program.
Maybe.
Here's a queen living as a shepherdess.
Yeah. So, and what happens in all of this is that she meets this shepherd who is supposedly named Mamandil, and it turns out that he's actually so they actually fall in love. He's like a singer, and he changes all these songs.
We need to pause super quick because we kind of skipped over an important detail about the new law. Because not only did Aldarion change it so that his daughter could be queen, so that the firstborn, no matter male or female, would be heir, but he also added a little caveat that she had to marry someone in the line of Elros.
Yes,
because Aldarion thinks that was the whole reason he and Erendis didn't work out. Is because she was not of the line of Elros.
Right.
So now all of this, all word of Ankalame's, airship and everything is spread throughout the land, and all these men of the line of Elros are chasing her, and she's like, well, where can I hide from all these men of the line of Elros? And she says, oh, in the shepherd country. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we can pick up.
So she thinks she's fallen in love with this shepherd, and it's going to be this like, unrequited, or not unrequited, but like this
like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing.
Yeah, where they're not allowed to be together. And it turns out she's basically in love with him. And then he's like, surprise, I'm actually Halakar, right? Who I'm actually of the line of Elros. So good news, we can get married. And then all of a sudden she's like, well, screw you. I don't want to marry you now.
I can't blame her. I cannot blame her. I would be so mad if someone deceived me like that. I really would be.
But if you really loved him, don't you think you'd get over it?
I don't know, because I'd be like, I can't trust. Like, I couldn't.
But what if he came
I thought
to you
I knew you, and now I don't, and that's like what our relationship is built on. How can there be trust?
But what if he came to you and said, I did it this way because there was no other, like, it would not have happened otherwise, right? Because of these stupid rules that were, like, because you went and locked yourself away in some weird witness protection program, and so, you learned to love me thinking I was somebody, thinking I was just this poor guy. What's changed? Now it just so happens I am actually somebody you can marry, right?
Because he was pretending from the very beginning. I think that's what bugs me. Is
but
he wasn't who he said he was.
He wasn't who he said he was, or like.
I just think it's a trust issue. I really do. Like, if someone's gonna, like, it would be like if you refuse to marry somebody,
mm-hmm.
and then they go off and have all kinds of like crazy plastic surgery and disguise themselves and like whatever, and then come back to you and you fall in love with them and they're like, psych, guess who I am. That wouldn't be cool. That wouldn't be cool.
Well, having
I
crazy
know. He
plastic
can't
surgery
undo
is a different
plastic
thing.
surgery. But I just feel like, I don't know. I just don't like the deceit in all of it. I can understand Erendis's I can understand Akalame's reaction.
I think we need to go back and watch Coming to America.
Maybe we do. I don't know why, but maybe we do.
Because in Coming to America, he's like the African prince.
That's right.
And so he goes to Queens, because where else are you going to find a queen? You go to Queens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to Queens and he meets this, and he pretends to be this like poor guy working in a restaurant, and then he meets the restaurant owner's daughter and falls in love with her, and she falls in love with him, and then he's like, surprise, I'm a king, right? Or I'm a prince, right? Future king of this country in Africa.
But see, he didn't disguise himself for the purpose of wooing the restaurant owner's daughter. Halakar disguised himself with the intent of wooing and marrying the queen.
But are you arguing that he doesn't really love her? He just wants to become the prince? Because my understanding here is that he did and he does love her. Like,
I don't know that you can surmise that from what's written here in the text. I feel like why else? Why else would he have? How could he have? What did he even know of her before now?
So I guess here's the thing: is there nothing in your mind, if you were in her shoes, is there nothing he could do to prove himself worthy of her at this point?
Maybe I just value trust more than a lot of people, but I would feel like, like, you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's going to get the relationship off on a really bad foot because he's been deceitful with her from the very beginning.
Yeah, I can see your argument there. I just think, like, how else was she going to meet somebody?
She clearly didn't want to meet anybody. He's like forcing herself on him. He's forcing himself on her. He just wants to marry a queen. That's what he wants. I don't see, because I don't understand what else there was. Like, how, because she was hiding, and I don't see how he could have known more about her. That would have actually, like, maybe he did. Maybe he did come to love her as he was wooing her as a fake shepherd. But I have a hard time believing that he initiated this plan because he truly loved her.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the plan was initiated because he wanted to marry the queen, and he was trying to outdo all of his competitors. Maybe that's a cynical reading. I don't know.
Well, I can see that you feel strongly about this. So
I do feel strongly about it.
I think we're just gonna have to move on.
We'll agree to disagree.
Fair point. Yeah, you're right. Trust is hugely important in in any marriage.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page there, since we're married.
Well, remind me not to tell Greta that I'm really the secret prince of some European, country. Right?
That'd actually be okay.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
See, I feel like that's different, though.
Oh.
I feel like that's different.
Oh, maybe I can tell her.
I don't know exactly how, but it's different. Because you didn't pretend to be somebody poor just to win my hand because I'm a queen.
Okay, so the problem is that you think that it's too much in his mind about being like that she's going to be queen,
Yes.
and he wants in on the power.
Yes.
Okay.
And he knew that she wouldn't, if he came to one of the balls or like whatever, that she wouldn't look twice at him. Right?
Yeah.
But so he disguised himself. Yeah. I think it's clever. I like the twist. I do.
Yeah.
But I also can totally understand Ankalame's reaction. I think mine would be the same.
Yeah. I can see that.
But it makes me really mad that she ends up marrying him.
Yeah, well, she does. She ends up marrying him, and they have a child. They have, what, 3 children? Is that right?
No, she just had the one.
They have the one. I'm sorry, they have the one. And the son is named Anarion. And, of course, he will be the king after Ankalame. And then Anarion ends up, I think we learn later, ends up having... what, 3 children?
3 kids,
2 daughters and then a son.
Yeah.
Saurion, who was born the last and is the 9th ruler of Númenor.
And his daughters wanted nothing to do with the scepter.
Right, yeah.
So it fell to the son.
Right.
But, well, I guess, Ankalame actually ends up marrying Haldar, right? Basically just to spite her cousin.
Right.
Because another part of that rule was that if she remained unwed for a certain amount of time, the throne would go to her cousin.
Yeah.
So she basically got married so that her cousin couldn't get the throne.
Yeah, you just get this picture of her that she became a very bad apple. Like, she was just
She's kind of rotten.
She was just full of spite and she just wanted to like mess with people. Like, she was not about to like, I don't know, how do you even describe it? Like, be like, not that she was never going to be happy, but she almost seems to be one of these people who, I mean, is sociopath too strong a term?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it is, but it's on the right track.
Like one degree or a couple degrees below sociopath,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That she just seems to like messing with people.
She does like messing with people, and that's what motivates her decisions, is because to make people unhappy.
Yeah.
And that's not okay.
Yeah, not okay. There's if you go to TolkienGateway.com or .net, by the way, there's a really cool painting of her. I mean, it's not an official painting or anything like that, but there's a really cool painting of her, picture of her on their page there. It is by, let's see, who's this by? Loading a little slow there, TolkienGateway.net.
It is a cool picture, though.
It is a very cool picture.
It's true.
Cheyenne Gel. This work is by Cheyenne Gel. All right. So yeah, go check that out. It's a cool painting. She looks like, I mean,
Just a little bit like Medusa without the hair.
She does. She looks like an evil queen.
She does.
I got to be honest,
You can't blame her though. Look at her upbringing.
I know.
Mean, she was doomed from the start.
Behind a lot of villains, there is a sad upbringing, right? There's a tragic backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So,
indeed.
Yeah, she does. She seems to be this first. It's unfortunate, maybe, and maybe hopefully people don't read this as like, see, Tolkien's being misogynistic here because the first queen of Númenor is like manipulative and and it's like, well, I don't think so. Like, I think it's just he's just showing like, here's this. Here's this new monarch, and here's her story, and and she ends up being kind of a bad apple, right? Now she's not. It's not entirely her fault because her father was not a great father, and her mother was not a great mother. But there have been other good people, right? There have been other good women in the stories. So
it even mentions in here, like backtracking quite a bit, that in one of his voyages, Aldarion met Galadriel. So
yeah,
that's a great example of a great female character. I did want to say real quick, just talking about Ankalame's upbringing. I can't quite remember where it was. I'm probably going to butcher it, but it basically said something like, never, like, kind of in the back of her mind or in her heart was her father prying her hands from him so that he could go to sea. And you just think about the sweet, innocent young girl she was at that point, you know, and I mean, I doubt at that time that Aldarion thought super far in the future and, you know, maybe considered how those actions would affect her in her later years. But, you know, all that stuff has an effect. I think it's a good reminder for us parents to, you know, to really be cognizant of how we're treating our kids and how we're, you know, how we're relating to them. And
it's so easy. You're making a great point. Like, it's so easy to, like, lose sight of when you're a parent that your primary role is to be a parent. Like, we don't really think about that enough. I lose sight of that with my own kids, and, you know, but your kids need you, right? You know, kids need their parents. They've been given the parents they have for a reason. And, you know, in an ideal world, they've got those parents there for them, right? To help them and to guide them through the world. And, you know, and what happens when the parent's not there is that there's like this, like, you know, little seed of something that can be sown in them, right? And, you know, regret, resentment, and it grows up within them without them even knowing what it's all about.
Yeah.
Right.
It does. It's just little things here or there that can really make a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, just think about in that moment when Aldarion was so anxious to go off to see that he's prying his daughter off of him. What if he had just taken a moment and said, listen, I love you. You know, this is something I have to do, but I promise I'll be back. I'll be thinking about you. And just because I'm not here doesn't mean I'm, you know, that I don't love you. You know, I mean, I don't know. It might not have made a huge difference, but that, you know, that even years later, Tolkien mentions that just that one instance, you know, of just think about, like, as a young girl, having your hands pried off of your father by him, you know, I mean, that kind of thing sticks with you. So,
especially when it's like you don't see him again for a long time.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's this little story in here about, like, the whole thing with, like, her like handmaidens or whatever they are, her handmaids, and like,
how she, like, forbid all of them to marry.
Yeah, like, I was just like, I don't know what this is all about in here. Did you have any insights on that?
About why she refused to let them marry?
Me, it's just a thing about, like, well, I understand that, but again, it's like, why?
What the point of it is?
What the point of it is, but what the point of the story, and then Halakar comes in and basically, like, arranges for them all to be married,
right,
against her will.
So it's just like it was a way for him to take revenge.
Yeah.
On her, for all the yucky stuff that she put him through and put all those women through, I think. But I don't know. I think it was just a little, I don't know. Maybe it's meant to be a little bit of comic relief, like, you reap what you sow, haha. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. So, and then it says, this last two paragraphs here, of the later years of Tar Aldarion, nothing can now be said, save that he seems to have continued his voyages to Middle-earth, and more than once left Ankalame as his regent. His last voyage took place about the end of the first millennium of the Second Age, and in the year 1075, Ankalame became the first ruling queen of Númenor. It is told that after the death of Tar Aldarion in 1098, Tar Ankalame neglected all her father's policies and gave no further aid to Gil-galad and Lindon. Her son Anarion, who was afterwards the eighth ruler of Númenor, first had two daughters. They disliked and feared the queen and refused the heirship, remaining unwed, since the queen would not in revenge allow them to marry. Anarion's son Surion was born the last, and was the ninth ruler of Númenor. Of Erendis, it is said that when old age came upon her, neglected by Oncalame and in bitter loneliness, she longed once more for Aldarion, and learning that he was gone from Númenor on what proved to be his last voyage, but that he was soon expected to return, she left Amare at last and journeyed unrecognized and unknown to the haven of Romena. There, it seems, she met her fate, but only the words, Erendis perished in water in the year 985, remain to suggest how it came to pass. So did she kill herself?
That's kind of what came into my brain.
Seems to be what it's insinuating.
Yeah, unless she finally decided to go on a sea voyage and then, the ship sunk.
Or maybe she was just on the lookout for him and fell in. Because it sounds like she wanted to see him. Like, it sounds like she really wanted, like, she was actually, like, regretful, like, of how everything had turned out.
Yeah, she longed once more for Aldarion.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe she really looked at him and she fell in. But it's super ironic, right? I mean, you think about how the sea plagued her, like, her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end, that's how she dies.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, it did absolutely nothing good for her. And then it ended up taking her life from her.
Yeah, tragic.
Very tragic. Like, it's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really sad. But maybe fitting. I think it's a good ending.
Yeah, fitting ending.
Yeah, fitting ending. Not good. I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, fitting.
So yeah, I mean, that's the end of Aldarion and Erendis.
So does he never come back, Aldarion?
Well, let's see. So it didn't say here that he did. I didn't see anything about it in the notes either. Let's see. Aldarion, parentage, Aldarion. There we go.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't, I mean, did that mean he just stayed in Middle Earth till he died? Or I guess I just wonder where he ended up.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't. It says he died in 1098 on Tolkien Gateway, which would be. Yeah, well, it says that in here. I'm sorry. It says that the death of Tar Aldarion in 1098. So it doesn't say whether he died there or, but it does. Well, he does say he came back, right?
It does.
His last voyage took place about the end of the first millennium of the Second Age in the year 1070. So it took place at the end of the first millennium, which would be, and he didn't die until 1098, right? So he obviously ruled for a long time after that.
Okay.
So it would seem that he ruled in Númenor for a good couple of decades at least before he passed away.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Good.
So, anything stand out to you in the notes? I didn't really like. I mean, it was all interesting stuff, but I didn't. I think we've covered some of it already, and it's essentially notes. So
right, yeah, I didn't. To be honest, I didn't even really look at them.
There's a couple of interesting things on the like philological notes on like what languages were spoken in Númenor and by who. Mm-hmm. For those of you who are really into the language part of it. But yeah, we won't spend really any time going over those because I'll probably butcher it if I try to explain it. Because I am not the philologist that many of you are, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
All right.
That's okay. I like you the way you are.
Any final thoughts on the story of Aldarion and Erendis?
Overall, I really liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super sad. I feel like there's not really much happy in it. Mm-hmm. But it's beautiful in its own right.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed discussing it. There was lots of stuff to talk about.
It's definitely a different type of story for Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of stories in Silmarillion like this, where it's a little bit more about a relationship between two people. There's not a lot of action. It's more about like the dynamic between them, and they always have really dark and have these like kind of sad overtones to them. So, yeah, but I think what's really interesting for us in terms of the Second Age deep dive and the future of Tolkiendom, which is seeing the Second Age fleshed out for us in some sort of way by this upcoming Amazon TV show, we see in this story like the roots of the future unrest that comes to that comes to Númenor.
Yes. Yeah.
And this really, like, up until this all started, Númenor was just kind of this island paradise, right? For the first 500 years of its existence, it was just this little haven of rest for these men who had helped. It was their little slice of paradise on Earth. But it was not always going to be that way. It couldn't always be that way.
And would you say that the downfall actually starts with Aldarion?
I don't know that you can say the downfall does, but it's like things begin moving in a direction towards the downfall.
Beginning of the end.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot to happen. There's a couple of thousand years more of history to unfold.
Yeah.
And all before the downfall, but you can see how Aldarion going to sea and getting back in touch with what's going on in Middle Earth, learning about the Shadow, Sauron's resurgence. You can see with Ankhalame as the queen and being kind of this first monarch that there's just something wrong with her. Like there's just something off about her. And you've got these threads being sewn in there, and it's becoming increasingly more about like this power struggle, right? Yeah,
you can see that the ball has been set in motion. You can see even just the progression from Aldarion to what's her name? Ankhalame.
I know I have a really hard time keeping track of the names in this story.
Yeah, you can see how just one generation removed, things are already significantly worse than they were previously. So, things are definitely not moving in the right direction.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, y'all, if, we've got some ideas on what we want to do next, but if you all have any strong votes that you want to put forward, then please feel free to reach out and let us know what you'd love to hear us take on next.
Yeah, please do.
And we're always happy to hear feedback like that as we consider what we're going to do next.
We are.
All right.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Yeah. Special thanks to our patrons, and especially our $5 or more patrons who get a shout out at the end of every episode. Eric B.
Daniel P.
David B.
Robert F.
Chuck F.
Andrew T.
Ish of the Hammer.
Chris L.
James L.
Al T.
Zeke F.
James A.
Emilio P.
Shannon S.
Teresa C.
Azia V.
Brian O.
Guys rock.
You guys rock. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you to our other patrons, and we appreciate all of our listeners.
Very much.
We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.